This is an expensive time to be buying it.
Palantir is holding strong at new all-time highs, but it has some investors questioning their playbook.
The stock is more than overdue for a correction.
Should I take profits now?
When a stock is priced to perfection the way Palantir is, it doesn't take much to move the stock up or down.
MarketBeat's Chris Markoch dives into the headlines and public perception that still has volatility looming over this explosive stock.
The floor for Palantir is now significantly higher.
But is Palantir's superior software enough to keep this stock soaring higher? Let's dive in. Chris, so great to have you back on the channel talking about your favorite stock, and a stock we have covered a lot on this channel. But it's time for an update on Palantir as the stock once again heads for all-time highs, even after some controversial news over the past 2 weeks. So Chris, we are going to dive into the details of this stock, looking at the financials, looking at the PE ratios, all of those things to give investors an idea of what to do with Palantir. If you are already a shareholder, what should you be doing right now as the stock is on another tear upwards? But before that, let's just dive into kind of the political backlash this company has seen, that up and down reaction from the country, from investors everywhere, just over the past couple of weeks for Palantir.
Right. So the controversy stems from the announcement that Palantir has been, I guess the word might be tentatively awarded contracts related to the proposed Golden Dome project. If that were to come to fruition, Palantir has already been named as a company that's going to receive some of the money from that. That's raising concerns about civil liberties and privacy issues regarding what individuals perceive Palantir's capabilities to be, vis-a-vis what are they going to do with this data once they collect it. So that's what this whole controversy is stemming from. The CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, was on CNBC, and he gave a fairly passionate defense of the company and why that's not going to happen. And it seemed like after the stock dipped a little bit, the stock has overcome that and is moving towards new highs.
Yeah, it's a good synopsis of kind of the last 2 weeks since we've talked about this stock. There's been just a lot of news. Again, that proposed $100 million contract from President Trump, getting Palantir to really work on this data collection project that has everybody up in arms for a little bit, but the stock is still doing so well right now, and again, continues to head higher.
Right.
What's behind this continued climb to new all-time highs? It's really sustained that pretty well for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, this is a volatile stock to begin with, but when you look at, there's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty that plays very well into what Palantir's core capabilities are for the US government. There's belief among the committed base of retail investors that Palantir is going to continue to grow not only on the government side, but on the commercial side. And we see that. We see evidence of Palantir getting new contracts, it seems like almost every week. And so that's a way for a lot of investors to say, we understand the stock may be expensive, but we're still willing to drive up the price because we see what the potential for the company may be.
I think it's important to talk about that potential when we look at forward PE, what this company is expected to get in earnings, but all of that is still very, very high. So let's get down to the financials of this company. I think this is what gives new investors, if you've not invested in Palantir, looking at the financials and the numbers just don't make sense for this company for a lot of long-time, kind of solid finance investors out there.
We've talked about this on the channel before, Bridget, and I'll say it again. I mean, I'm not going to argue math with other investors. By almost every objective financial metric that's used, Palantir is an expensive stock. You can look at the price to earnings, whether you want to look at it on a trailing 12-month basis, a forward 12-month basis. I mean, it's an expensive stock. The price to sales is high. The price to book ratio is high. Everything about the stock from those metrics is expensive. The stock also has made a gigantic run up in stock price over the last 12 months, just year to date. That, from a technical standpoint, would be screaming to a lot of people that the stock is more than overdue for a correction. The question really comes down to, what are you going to do about that?
A lot of times that's looking into what the institutions are doing. And right now, there's a lot of institutional sales happening in Palantir stock. Just in the last 2 weeks, a lot of big holders have dropped their position in Palantir by about 50%. But before that, in Q1, there were a lot of Palantir purchases happening. If you want to see a list of all of the major companies getting huge institutional buys in Q1 of this year, check out this free premium article just for our YouTube viewers. It's all about the 5 stocks institutional investors couldn't resist in Q1. Make sure to scan the QR code or click the link in the description of this video to read that article totally free and see the other 5 companies that we're seeing a lot of strong institutional buying at the start of this year. Chris, Palantir really fits that bill. There's a lot of institutions that have really been paying attention to Palantir, especially this year. In Q1, a lot of buys. But now there seems to be more institutions that are looking to take profits just in this last week or two.
Institutional investors such as Stanley Druckenmiller, Cathie Wood, who have been selling shares of Palantir recently. And so people say, oh, is this a time to sell? And my answer to you is, it might be. Anytime you're an investor and you have a stock that's doubled, in some cases quadrupled from where you bought it, again, it's never a bad idea. Nobody's ever gone broke taking a profit. And if you're somebody who's looking to trade Palantir, but you're not really committed to the stock long term, yeah, this is an expensive time to be buying it unless you're trying to short it. And that hasn't worked out well for a lot of people. But if you're a long-term investor, the case becomes a little trickier. And we've talked about this in the channel before. There's a lot of retail investors who were buying Palantir back in 2021, 2022, when it was below $10 a share. And you had a lot more retail investors that were coming in when it was between $10 and $20 a share, and when it was between $20 and $30 a share. That's a little bit of a tougher sell to ask people to part with those shares, because what you're really doing is you're selling those cheap shares that you bought in the past, and you're trading them essentially for the opportunity to buy shares that will most likely never be that cheap again. And so that's the question that you kind of have to wrestle with. If you're in Palantir for the long haul, this may not be the optimal time to be adding to your position. You would want to wait for the stock to pull back. I think there's a lot of retail investors who are waiting and kind of hoping that Palantir might pull back 20, 25% from where it is now, and that would present a very attractive buying opportunity. But right now, again, that's a question that every investor is going to have to answer for themselves.
Yeah, I want to dive into this. What kind of strategy should those long-term investors have on Palantir? Because this stock has just moved so quickly. As we look at the chart, you can see this time last year, it was around the $20 range. It shot up to $120, right, $130. Then in April, back down to that $75, $80 range, and now back up to all-time highs nearing $140.
Right.
And that is a lot of volatility, a lot of changes. It's already at such a high price point. I think a lot of long-term investors are looking at this going, is it possible for it to shoot up much higher than this? Or is it more likely that we're going to see a pullback? And so the strategy I want to have you talk about a little more, right, is for those long-term investors who got in at $10 or $20, who are wondering, should I take profits now,
sure,
and get back in when that inevitable drop does come down the road?
So if we're dealing with somebody who's looking at Palantir with a long-term lens, they're saying, I'm still committed to holding Palantir for another 5 years, 10 years, or longer. It's not necessarily a bad strategy to look at it like this. If you put an initial investment of $1,000 or $2,000 into Palantir when the shares were really cheap, it might not be a bad idea to take out $1,000 or $2,000 or even just a portion of that out as profit right now. And then you've recouped your initial investment and you don't have to worry about it. All you're doing right now is playing with house money. And then at that point, you just let that investment ride. That's a solid strategy that a lot of investors use. And then at that point, you just have to decide where your entry and exit points are, where your entry points are going to be. Consensus analyst opinion on MarketBeat, of the analysts surveyed by MarketBeat, still says Palantir is overvalued at this price. But there are other analysts who are suggesting Palantir could still be going up to $200 or even higher in the next 12 to 18 months. So if you believe that, well, then now would be a great time to be buying the stock. So you see, it just really depends on what your time frame is and where you do see the opportunity for this stock.
Yeah, the variations of analyst opinions is a
Absolutely.
great point to bring up right now because this is a stock that has surprised many analysts, many institutional
Right.
investors, many naysayers who said this stock is not going to go anywhere, and it has proved that wrong
Right.
over and over again. And like you said, there's many traders out there who've lost a lot of money betting against Palantir. The future could be anything, but I want you to talk about, I know this is a company you've researched extensively. What about Palantir has you believing and other long-term investors believing that this is just the start of a really strong future for this company? What makes this company so uniquely investable?
What I think is really the interesting part about Palantir that I've brought up before is Palantir's ontology. And the ontology is what allows companies to use Palantir's platforms and extract useful data that really allows AI to do what many people are hoping that AI would be able to do, and not just be something that, well, it's kind of a nice thing that we have, but it's not really getting us the insights that we want. Palantir's ontology is allowing them to, it doesn't matter what large language model the companies are using, Palantir can work with it and help extract data that the companies can use. And what I see is, I'm not so much interested in the government side. That's a whole different story. I'm looking at the commercial side, and you're seeing clients that have used Palantir and are saying, we'll never use anything else. And when you get that kind of word of mouth from companies like BP, you're seeing Palantir being able to grow their business without necessarily having to really expand their sales force. They're just getting great word of mouth marketing, and you're seeing a growth on the commercial side. You are all still seeing growth on the government side. Again, this is a company that's one of one. It's not one of many, and I think that's where some people really get it confused.
Yeah, I've heard different analysts calling Palantir one of the most important software companies of the future, that this company is going to continue to be one of the biggest players in the new AI wave, this new AI revolution that's happening, but that Palantir is really that software side that makes it so invaluable.
Right.
Are we continuing to see more and more analysts, tech experts, other people out there coming to Palantir's defense of, no, really, investors, the general market doesn't understand how valuable this technology is?
You know, I think we are, and I'm not going to say all of the analysts are necessarily coming to the company's defense as much as I think some analysts are finally throwing in the towel, and they're realizing that there was an opportunity here that was missed. And in fairness, Palantir did go public in a non-traditional way. They went public via direct listing. So a lot of institutional investors didn't really get a chance to look under the hood of Palantir before it went public. And they're kind of catching up to that now and realizing that there's a great opportunity here. And I say that because if you look at the analyst rating, which we've looked at before on this channel, the floor for Palantir is now significantly higher. Just maybe a year ago, we were looking at a potential floor of Palantir in the 40s, and then it was in the 60s. Now the consensus opinion is this: the floor for Palantir, the consensus rating right now is Palantir could be in the 80s, in the mid 80s. So I'm not suggesting that a fall to the mid 80s from where it's trading at today in the mid 130s is insignificant. That's a significant drop, but that's something that a lot of investors would say, okay, well, again, if I bought shares when they were in the 40s, if I bought shares when they were in the 30s, I can live with that. I'm still well ahead of the game as far as Palantir is concerned. So again, I think analysts are coming around to it because I think a lot of institutional investors are finally saying, okay, there's something here and we missed it here and we don't want to keep missing it.
Yeah, there's a few more points I want to get to before we wrap up this week's discussion on Palantir, and that is just that volatility, the potential for more volatility. The stock has already had so many ups and downs that we've talked about. Should investors be prepared for even more volatility ahead and some of those really big swings, like you said, the potential of going from the 140s back down to the 80s? Is that a likely story for this company's future in the next couple of months, even just this summer?
I'm not sure if we're going to see swings of that magnitude, Bridget, but I would not be. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And I've said this before. I've been consistent about this on the channel. It wouldn't surprise me if you still see moves of 10% down, maybe even 10, 15% down. It wouldn't surprise me. We're a headline driven market, and it wouldn't take much to move the stock down if just that headline about concerns over data collection, it sank the stock. When a stock is priced to perfection, the way Palantir is, it doesn't take much to move the stock up or down. Again, if you're an investor and you're committed to the stock for the long term, you don't have to really worry about that much. Certainly, if you're looking to trade Palantir stock and you're looking for entry and exit points, then yeah, you have to be very aware of the fact that it's a volatile stock and it's going to continue to be volatile.
And that leads to my last point that I thought was really important to talk about, and that is just the headline-driven nature of the market right now. We've seen so many other examples of really strong, solid tech companies that really get turned into political issues whenever a company gets tied to that political climate that we're in right now, the polarizing topics and headlines that we're seeing. We've seen it take a hit on the stock, and right. the best case study for that is Tesla.
Yeah.
We've seen that company really take so many hits this past year, and now we're seeing that very public feud between Elon Musk and President Trump, and the stock price seems to follow whatever is happening in those headlines of the moment. Is there a chance, simply because how tied Palantir is to government contracts, how President Trump seems to be favoring this company for some of the projects he wants to do with the defense in this country, could this company really see more of that public outcry and public outrage that might impact the stock again, simply because of those headlines, like you said?
It could. I don't see Palantir quite in the same way that I look at Tesla, because with Tesla, people are looking for any reason to bring the Tesla stock price down and to convince themselves that it's just a car company and it's just this. And so when those headlines come in, it gives people reason to do something that they wanted to do anyway, and that's bring the Tesla stock price down. You might see some of that with Palantir, and I thought there might be a little bit more of a reaction on the stock price. But I think the reality is people are starting to look beyond the political issues, and they're realizing that this isn't about Palantir wearing the white hat or Palantir wearing the black hat. I think they're realizing it's just Palantir's got really superior technology to a lot of other companies, and that makes it attractive to companies and to the government to use the software, especially at a time when companies and the government are looking to get more efficient. So it's simply that Palantir's got the right tool for the job, and I think that's going to offset concerns of, again, whether or not people perceive them as being on one side or the other, which I don't think is necessarily fair to the company.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's a good point for investors to consider. Do you think Palantir is a good company or bad company, or just excellent at the software it's developed? Let us know what you think in the comments, what your feelings are about this company, where you think the stock price is headed, and what your strategy is as a long-term Palantir investor. Have you taken any profits, or are you holding on for the long term to those low-cost early entry shares you might have gotten? Thank you, Chris, for this great analysis on Palantir today. If you're not a subscriber on this channel yet, hit subscribe. Chris and I talk about Palantir at least once a month, it seems like, on this channel, because there's so much movement in this stock. Thanks again for watching, everyone. As always, happy investing.